Now we move on to our second resolution. The second resolution, the Belt and Road Initiative is a $1 trillion blunder. Also known as One Belt, One Road, this is China's push to create direct infrastructure connections between China and large parts of Eurasia, Africa, and South America. It is already underway, but will it pay off for China? That is the question we are asking. Our first speaker is Ian Bremmer. Ian Bremmer, on this resolution, do you declare yes or no?
I declare no.
I would like to do this. I would like to give you an additional 30 seconds to explain to the layperson what is the Belt and Road Initiative. If you can do it in 30 seconds, and then you get your 90 seconds on top of that.
Well, sure, I could actually put those two together, because one of the reasons it's not a $1 trillion blunder is because they've invested $50 billion so far, and they've put out loans for 300. So, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, give them a couple more years before they can make a $1 trillion blunder. It is an enormous set of strategic investments in infrastructure in countries around the world, driven by Beijing. It is not as much multilateral as its hub and spoke, and you could call it the Chinese equivalent of a Marshall Plan, except that democracy is not one of the driving pieces of conditionality. No, I don't think it's a $1 trillion blunder, and not just because they haven't actually spent that much yet. First of all, it's marketing genius. You know, you go to Davos and you see a few heads of state. You go to the Belt and Road Summit and you see more than anywhere in the world except at the United Nations General Assembly, and they're all there to do strategy at the convening of Beijing, who they want to write more checks. That's pretty extraordinary. You see that there are lots of countries in the world that are willing to do more Beijing's bidding politically, because the Chinese are the only ones that are able to do long-term strategy and put cash behind it. So, for example, I was with I guess it was the Slovak Prime Minister the other day, who said that he spends more time with the Chinese Prime Minister in the regular East European 16+1 format of summitry than he spends with most of his neighboring countrymen in his positions. And he, as a consequence, is wanting to align his country much more economically with the Chinese. You're seeing how in Peru, they do about a third their business with the US, a third their trade with China, a third with Europe, but because it's the Chinese government, they're doing much more alignment with the Chinese as a whole. You put these things together and you see that it's an extraordinary, not just marketing plan, but a way for the Chinese to develop real political leverage around the world that otherwise they'd have a hard time picking up.
Thank you. That was exactly 2 minutes I was counting to myself. Thanks very much, Ian Bremmer. Our next speaker on the resolution, the Belt and Road Initiative is a $1 trillion blunder, Michelle Flournoy. Michelle Flournoy, how do you declare, yes or no?
I declare no.
You have 90 seconds.
Because I agree that the BRI will enable China to gain a strategic foothold and influence in key countries. What's not yet clear is how successful they'll be, because there has been some backlash generated in some countries. So let's start with the benefits. China has demonstrated that the model can work in places like Sri Lanka and Pakistan and Greece, and it believes that BRI brings them several benefits. First, new export markets, promotion of Chinese currency, tariff reductions, access to new trade routes, and most importantly, as Ian said, political influence. But there has been a backlash. A number of small, debt-ridden countries are now more concerned about the risks of signing up. They witnessed Sri Lanka, who was forced to give China a 99-year lease to a strategic port because they could not pay their debts to Beijing. And so other countries now fear a similar fate. You've seen Malaysia, Maldives, Sierra Leone, Myanmar, and others backing away from BRI projects or trying to demand refinancing. So it's definitely hit some bumpiness in the road. But the real problem is that the US and its allies do not have an answer. We don't have a counteroffer, a viable alternative. I think one of the places we could compete more effectively is in the digital Silk Road, in working with our allies to offer an alternative to some of these Chinese companies like Huawei that risk creating intelligence networks abroad for for the Chinese as opposed to true telecom openness and transparency.
Thank you, Michelle Flournoy. On the resolution, the Belt and Road Initiative is a $1 trillion blunder. Our next speaker is Yasheng Huang. Yasheng, do you declare yes or no?
I declare yes. Yeah. So remember, the question is whether or not it is a $1 trillion blunder. So it is a finance question. All I heard from my other two previous speakers, they are talking about political payoff, right? So even though they say no, I don't think they answered the question. So the Belt and Road program is based on a false premise, which is that you need these massive investment projects to jumpstart economic growth. If that principle had been correct, the countries that today at the top of the economic pyramid will be countries such as Egypt rather than England. Egyptians were capable of building big projects. Asian Chinese were able to build big projects, the Great Wall, the Great Canal. The falsity with that idea is that, in fact, if you look at economic research closely, the infrastructures happen after economic growth. They are typically the result of economic growth. And this is the devil of doing social science, because very often in social science, actually all the time in social science, two things happen at the same time, and we don't know which one is the cause and which one is the effect. Correlation doesn't mean causation. Much of the relationship between infrastructure and growth is actually correlation rather than causation.
I'm sorry your time is up, but I'm going to be coming back to you because you're a yes vote. On this resolution, the Belt and Road Initiative is a $1 trillion blunder. Parag Khanna, do you declare yes or no?
I declare no. The Belt and Road Initiative really began well before it had a name. You know, we used to call it the Silk Roads. And in a way, the process of Asia knitting itself back together through this process of infrastructural connectivity across this vast space of Afro-Eurasia, it's actually called, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia, reconnecting is really something that is as inevitable as history itself, because it was interrupted basically by colonialism and the Cold War. And now with colonialism and the Cold War over, the Soviet Union collapsed about 30 years ago. Since that time, this process has been underway. It just acquired a name a couple of years ago with Belt and Road Initiative, but I've personally been backpacking through a lot of those countries for at least 20 years. So it's been going on for a long time, and it's going to continue. In some ways, it's just getting warmed up. In fact, a study that the RAND Corporation did, looking at the trade linkages between pairs of countries that are part of Belt and Road, said that it is win-win. Countries are winning and gaining from the trade intensity that is growing through the relationships. Citigroup, an American bank, obviously, said that Belt and Road is moving away from just one-to-many, sort of whatever China wants, to many-to-many, as everyone gets involved. And indeed, I think that China has succeeded more than it even anticipated. It's unleashed this case of FOMO, right, fear of missing out. Because now that China has announced Belt and Road, the US has its USIFDC, Europe has its Asia Connectivity Initiative. Everyone is launching connectivity initiatives. Everyone is getting involved in infrastructure finance. And that's just going to make sure that the broader process of connectivity succeeds even further. So my punchline on this is, you know, Beijing builds lots of roads, but all roads won't lead to Beijing.
Thank you very much. And again, to our final speaker on this panel in this round, Susan Thornton, on the resolution, the Belt and Road Initiative is a $1 trillion blunder. Do you declare yes or no?
I declare yes.
You have 90 seconds.
I think what we're going to end up with actually is a lot of bridges to nowhere. You know, the U.S. had a great idea too for connectivity. It was called the New Silk Road. It was supposed to connect Afghanistan with all these other countries in Europe and Russia. And we tried to do these projects, and guess what? No one would pay for any of them. And do you know why? Because they were dumb. They were dumb, and they weren't going to make any money. And nobody wants to pay for projects that are not going to make any money and bridges that are going to lead to nowhere. And a lot of these projects, a high-speed railroad from Beijing to Moscow, are you kidding me? I mean, no one's going to be on that train. How is it going to make money? So the Chinese are going around writing lots of checks. Great. Again, it's an issue of, you know, what system do we believe in? We have market capitalist economics because it produces efficiency. And this is not an efficient set of projects. It's not an efficient set of financial investments. And I think the Chinese are going to end up wasting a lot of money.
Thank you, Susan Thornton. So that concludes the opening round on this resolution.